At Silvergate International Airport, one of the busiest transit hubs in the American Southwest, a flight attendant tore up a black teen's ticket and sneered, "Not everyone belongs in business class." She had no idea the girl standing quietly in front of her was Layla Greene, the 17-year-old daughter of Malcolm Greene, the CEO of SkySpan, one of the largest international airlines in the world. Layla had just finished a leadership summer program in Denver and was flying home to Phoenix. Though she came from immense wealth, she never flaunted it. Her father had always taught her, "You don't need to prove who you are, just live by your values." That day, Layla had chosen to fly solo. Just like any other student, dressed modestly and armed with nothing but confidence and kindness. But no one had prepared her for the moment she would be humiliated in public, not for anything she said or did, but simply because of her appearance and the assumptions it triggered. Layla Greene was 17, brilliant, poised, and grounded in a deep belief in fairness, traits instilled by her parents since childhood. Despite being the daughter of Malcolm Greene, CEO of SkySpan Airlines, she never let her family's status define her. She was the kind of teenager who held the door for strangers, read social justice blogs in her free time, and believed that how you treated others said more about your character than your resume ever could. That morning, she had dressed in simple jeans, a clean white shirt, and braided her hair neatly before heading to the Denver airport. She didn't expect anyone to recognize her last name, and frankly, she preferred it that way. As she arrived at the Silvergate International Airport for her connecting flight home to Phoenix, she made her way to boarding gate D17 with a valid first-class ticket in hand. Booked weeks earlier by her father's office as a small celebration for completing a prestigious youth leadership program. The boarding area was buzzing with tired travelers, rolling suitcases, and the occasional intercom announcement cutting through the air. It was there she encountered Monica Reynolds, a 40-year-old flight attendant known by her peers for her stern demeanor and rigid adherence to her own rules. Monica had been with the airline for nearly 2 decades, long enough to build a reputation, not all of it flattering. Several colleagues had quietly commented on her history of disproportionately targeting black and brown passengers with added scrutiny, though nothing had ever been formally addressed. As Layla approached, she greeted Monica with a warm smile and handed over her boarding pass. Monica barely looked at her. Her eyes scanned the name, then flicked to Layla's face, lingering for a beat too long. Something cold flashed across her features. "Are you sure this is your seat?" she asked, her voice flat but accusatory. Layla blinked, confused. "Yes, ma'am. I believe it's seat 2A. Monica scrutinized the ticket again, as if it might be fake, then tilted her head with suspicion. "I've seen these kinds of scams before," she said under her breath. "You kids print things off the internet and hope no one checks too closely." Layla stood stunned. Before she could respond, Monica let out an exaggerated sigh, tore the boarding pass in half with a dramatic rip, and dropped the pieces into a nearby trash can. "Not today," she snapped. "You'll need to go back to the service desk." Around them, several passengers turned their heads, some with curiosity, others with quiet unease. The humiliation hit Layla like a slap. She could feel the burn in her cheeks and the pressure building behind her eyes. But she didn't yell, didn't cause a scene. Instead, she retrieved the torn pieces from the trash with trembling hands and walked a few steps away, clutching them like a symbol of something far bigger than a cancelled seat. Layla stood frozen for a moment, holding the shredded ticket in her hands, trying to steady her breath and quiet the sting rising in her chest. The entire gate area felt heavier now, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Mustering what composure she had left, she approached Monica again and calmly said, "My father booked that seat for me." Malcolm Greene. The moment the name left her lips, she saw the flicker in Monica's eyes, but instead of recognizing the name, Monica scoffed. "Right, of course he did," she said with a smirk, her voice dripping with condescension. "You kids think you can throw around some made-up story and skip the line. That name means nothing to me. And that ticket? Fake." Her voice was loud enough to draw even more attention. Around them, travelers began to murmur. Some shifted uncomfortably, watching from their seats with furrowed brows. A few looked at Layla with suspicion, others with sympathy. One elderly woman leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Poor girl." But no one moved. No one intervened. The injustice hung in the air, thick and unchallenged. Layla felt the weight of every stare, every judgment, every assumption. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone, not out of fear, but from the hurt of having to rely on a name she never wanted to weaponize. She didn't want to be that rich girl flashing her family connections, but she also refused to be treated like she didn't belong. She dialed her father. He answered after 2 rings, his voice composed but alert. "Layla? You should be boarding by now." Her throat tightened. "Dad, something happened. The flight attendant ripped up my ticket. She said it was fake." There was a pause on the line, long enough for Layla to hear the low murmurs of a boardroom in the background. Then the tone of her father's voice shifted, calm but sharp. "Where are you right now?" She gave her location. "Stay there," he said. "Do not move. I'll handle it." With that, he hung up. Back in Chicago, Malcolm Greene was seated at the head of a long glass conference table, mid-presentation to SkySpan's board of directors. At Layla's words, he stood up without explanation. Executives turned, puzzled, as he stepped out of the room, phone already to his ear. Within minutes, he had reached the airport's regional executive director, demanding an immediate investigation into the incident at Gate D-17. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His reputation and authority carried enough weight. Meanwhile, Layla remained by the wall near the gate, watching travelers pass by with boarding passes she no longer had. Her stomach churned, not from fear, but from the helplessness that came when you knew you had done everything right and still weren't believed. The quiet fury in her chest wasn't just for herself. It was for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong before being given a chance to speak. Layla sat alone near the wide glass windows overlooking the tarmac, the hum of boarding announcements echoing faintly behind her. She stared out at the planes taxiing along the runway, their wings catching the golden edge of late-morning light. In her lap were the torn pieces of her boarding pass, carefully retrieved and smoothed out. Though still useless, she hadn't cried, she wouldn't. But inside, a storm raged. Her chest was tight with emotion, anger, disbelief, and something deeper, more hollow, the sting of being judged without a voice. She kept replaying the moment Monica had looked her over, not her name, not her credentials, but her skin, her braids, her youth, and decided she didn't belong. And not just that, decided she didn't matter. Layla had always believed in doing things the right way, in keeping her head down, working hard, and letting character speak louder than privilege. It was how she was raised. Her father, Malcolm, had always reminded her, "In this world, people will try to define you before they even know you. Don't give them permission." And then there was that one phrase he had repeated often, sometimes casually, sometimes with his eyes locked on hers, like he needed her to remember it forever. "You don't have to win every battle. Just don't compromise with injustice." Those words echoed in her mind now, louder than the bustle of the terminal. Layla knew she wasn't the first person this had happened to. She knew Monica had probably dismissed others before her, passengers who lacked connections, who didn't have a CEO for a father, who couldn't make one call and shake an entire system. That realization hit hard. It wasn't just about her ticket anymore. It wasn't even just about Monica. It was about the way people in power sometimes wielded that power like a weapon, sharp, quiet, and subtle enough to hide behind policy. Layla took a breath and felt her spine straighten. She had a choice. She could wait quietly, let her father handle it, board the plane, and never look back. Or she could speak. Not just for herself, but for every person who had ever stood in her shoes. Ashamed, silenced, and told in a dozen unspoken ways that they didn't belong. She pulled out her phone again, not to call anyone this time, but to jot down a few notes. Thoughts about unconscious bias, about gatekeeping, about dignity. Ideas formed quickly, not out of revenge, but out of a sudden clarity. She didn't know exactly how she would use her voice yet, but one thing had become certain. She would. Layla realized this moment, humiliating as it was, could either be a closed chapter or a turning point. She chose the latter. No longer was this about boarding a plane. It was about confronting a mindset. And as she sat quietly amid a sea of indifferent travelers, Layla made herself a silent promise. "I won't be quiet this time. I will not let this slide. Because if I don't speak, this will happen again. To someone without a father like mine, without backup, without anyone to call. And they deserve better too. 40 minutes after the incident, the atmosphere at gate D17 shifted abruptly. A black company car pulled up outside the terminal, and within minutes, Malcolm Greene, calm, composed, and unmistakably authoritative, stepped through the automatic doors, flanked by two senior airport security officers and a regional SkySpan representative. He didn't need a name badge or an introduction. People recognized him instantly. Conversations at the gate quieted. Managers appeared from side hallways, their expressions stiff with nervous urgency. Monica, still stationed at the counter, looked up and froze. Her face paled slightly, though she tried to mask it with a professional posture. She was summoned immediately to the side by a senior operations manager. Layla watched from a few feet away, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from anticipation. Monica approached the small group with a clipboard clutched tightly in her hand. When asked about the incident, she stood firm, her voice clipped and defensive. I followed procedure, she insisted. The ticket looked suspicious. I was protecting the integrity of the flight. Her tone was confident, but her eyes darted. Malcolm listened quietly, arms crossed, face unreadable. When she finished, he opened a leather folder handed to him by his assistant and revealed a set of documents. Digital confirmations from SkySpan's booking system, time-stamped logs showing the purchase of the ticket, and a seating chart with Layla's assigned seat marked clearly in first class. This was booked by my executive office 3 weeks ago, he said, voice even but resonant. He then motioned to one of the airport supervisors, who stepped forward with a tablet and displayed hallway security footage of Layla presenting her ticket without incident. There was no attempt to deceive, Malcolm continued, turning to Monica. There was no fake ticket. What there was judgment. Monica's lips parted, but no words came out. The terminal had grown still. Passengers nearby, some of whom had witnessed the earlier altercation, leaned closer, listening. Senior airport staff stood in awkward silence. Malcolm didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten anyone. Instead, he turned slightly so that both Monica and the crowd could hear. I didn't come here because my daughter was disrespected. I came because any of our passengers, of any race, age, or background, could have been treated this way. And I can't run a company that allows it. His gaze landed on Monica for a final moment before shifting back to the manager. I don't need my daughter to be given special treatment. I need every SkySpan passenger to be treated with the same dignity I expect for her. A hush fell over the terminal. Monica lowered her eyes. The manager nodded quickly and assured Malcolm that the matter would be escalated immediately. Layla stood still, processing the moment. Her father hadn't spoken out of anger, but out of principle. And he hadn't defended just her, he had stood for something much bigger. As the group dispersed and Monica was quietly escorted to a side hallway, Layla realized something had shifted in the space around her. For the first time since arriving at the gate, she felt seen. Not because of her last name, but because the truth had finally been spoken out loud. Following the confrontation, Monica was placed on immediate suspension, pending a full investigation. An internal review launched within hours by SkySpan's executive team. But while many expected Layla to push for a formal complaint or even consider legal action, she surprised everyone by declining to pursue any personal litigation. Instead, when approached privately by her father and members of the airline's board, Layla made a thoughtful proposal that turned the narrative from retaliation to transformation. She suggested the development of a comprehensive unconscious bias training program, not a generic corporate checklist, but one co-designed by those who had lived through it. Young leaders, students, and everyday passengers who understood what subtle prejudice looked like and how it felt. If we want real change, she explained in a meeting days later, we can't just punish one person and move on. We have to educate the system itself. Her clarity and conviction impressed not only her father, but also key decision-makers at SkySpan. The result was a new initiative called Project Elevate, a multi-phase training program that would be rolled out first to flight attendants and gate agents, then eventually across all departments of the airline. Layla was invited to serve as a youth advisor on the project, joining a working group made up of airline HR leaders. diversity consultants, and other student activists she had met during her leadership summit in Denver. Together, they crafted modules that went beyond surface-level inclusion, focusing on real-world scenarios, implicit bias triggers, and emotional intelligence in high-pressure environments. The program included workshops, simulations, storytelling sessions, and post-training reflections to ensure the material resonated with staff on a personal level. SkySpan committed to making this training part of every new employee's onboarding process, as well as a requirement for yearly recertification. More importantly, Layla insisted that employee feedback be included anonymously and reviewed quarterly to measure progress, transparency, and impact. Her approach was data-driven but rooted in empathy, an ideal blend of youthful insight and pragmatic structure. For Layla, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reformation. She had no interest in seeing Monica lose her livelihood. What she wanted was for no other passenger to be treated the way she had been, and for staff to have the tools to unlearn biases they didn't even know they carried. What had started as a humiliating encounter at Gate D17 was slowly transforming into a company-wide reckoning, a chance not just to patch a broken moment, but to rebuild trust in every future interaction. SkySpan's CEO, Malcolm Greene, called it one of the most promising culture shifts in the company's recent history, and gave Layla full credit for leading it with maturity far beyond her years. For Layla, the real victory wasn't just a new program, it was watching others begin to care as deeply as she did about something that had, for too long, been ignored. At the official press conference announcing SkySpan's company-wide diversity and bias reform initiative, Layla stood confidently at the podium, a simple navy blazer draped over her shoulders and a small microphone clipped to her collar. Cameras flashed and reporters leaned in, eager to capture her words. With quiet strength, she looked out over the room and said, "A ticket can be torn, but dignity is not something anyone has the right to rip away." Her voice didn't waver. That one sentence, clipped and powerful, echoed across national headlines within hours. Social media picked it up first, then cable news, podcasts, and op-eds. The caption, "CEO's daughter faces discrimination, sparks airline reform," trended nationwide, not just because of who Layla was, but because of what she stood for. She had become, unintentionally, a symbol of the change so many passengers had long hoped to see. But beyond the headlines and applause, Layla knew what truly mattered was what came next. What the airline did with the momentum and how future passengers would be treated differently. While the cameras eventually turned off and the media frenzy settled, the impact of that day lingered, embedded in training rooms, employee handbooks, and daily staff interactions. The initiative wasn't just policy, it was personal. The lesson Layla carried forward, and hoped others would too, was simple but urgent. Discrimination doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles politely and tears your ticket in front of a crowd. It's not always loud or obvious. It lives in quiet dismissals, skeptical glances, and unchecked assumptions. And justice? It doesn't wear a badge or carry a business card. It lives in how we choose to respond when we've been silenced or disrespected. You don't need a title to speak up. You need courage. Layla didn't need to retaliate. She didn't need to raise her voice or demand revenge. What she did was harder. She turned humiliation into leadership, pain into progress. In a world where many young people are told to wait their turn, she stood up and created a new lane. Her story reminds us that change doesn't come from power alone. It comes from people who use that power with purpose. She didn't want special treatment, she wanted equal treatment. And that distinction changed everything. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a flight gone wrong or a teenager wronged by a biased employee. It was the story of a young woman who transformed herself from a silent victim into a powerful voice, one that challenged a multi-billion-dollar industry to look in the mirror. She reminded us that leadership doesn't require age, authority, or a corner office. Sometimes it just takes someone in the right moment saying, "This isn't okay, and we're going to fix it." Layla Greene didn't just board a plane, she helped an entire system take off in a better direction. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that one voice can spark real change, then you're exactly the kind of person we created X Daily Stories for. Every week, we bring you powerful narratives like Layla's, Stories of quiet strength, bold justice, and people who choose integrity over silence. So don't miss the next journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and be part of a growing community that believes in empathy, courage, and the power of standing up, even when it's hard. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest action can change the biggest system. Stay inspired, stay aware. This is X Daily Stories, where every story leaves a mark.